I'm here with Father Sebastian White, Dominican priest, East Coast Province, editor-in-chief of the Magnificat. And Magnificat, has had such an impact, influence. I see it all over the place. I use it in preaching a lot of times. So it's just a great work you all are doing, like so many others, Dominican efforts going on today. But how did it come to be that you're editor-in-chief? You're a relatively young priest.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Father. Very happy to be here. It's a great joy for me to be on down with EWTN. I kind of stunned, actually, to be honest with you. I've known of it, and it was very influential in my life for many years, and particularly at a particular moment. So I had entered the Dominicans in 2008, and then studied, our novitiate was in Cincinnati, studied in Washington at the Dominican House of Studies, and was ordained in 2014. And when I was ordained, I was assigned to be the chaplain at NYU. So I was working as the chaplain for 4 years, living at our parish in Greenwich Village and helping out, just working as a priest there in New York and with the students at New York University. And towards the end of my time there, Father Peter John Cameron, who was the founding editor, the first editor-in-chief of Magnificat, and he's a Dominican of our province. So after 20 years of leading it and being the editor, he decided it was the right moment for him to hand it on, and the publisher asked him to recommend another Dominican, asked him to suggest somebody, and he suggested me. So at that point, then it was I got my provincial superior agreed to that, and met with the publisher as well. And so then at that point, in the summer of 2018, I began and succeeded Father Cameron to become the editor. I mean, we were working ahead, so that really the in terms of the publication, it was the January issue of 2019 was the first issue for me.
And so you were already working with Father Cameron?
Well, I knew him. I just knew him from being a fellow friar, fellow Dominican. I didn't really have any involvement in Magnificat other than, occasionally writing to him and, telling him I enjoyed something, or I would occasionally write to him if I came across a book that I thought he would like, or I would send it to him, but I didn't have any really. I wasn't involved in the work at all, but it was really he sensed that I would be able to do the job well, and so.
And I was surprised how big you said like 16 people work.
Yeah, or more really. I mean, there's 16 or 18 I think in the office and in the United States, and then there's a team in France as well, because it's really it began in France
by Dominicans.
No, part of a layman, Pierre Marie Dumont is his name. He's a married man. He has 12 children, and he was working in a French publishing agency, and which has it's kind of run by a Catholic family, but has it's a big company, many different divisions and departments, and he in the early 90s envisioned this way for Catholic families to be able to pray and to have a something that puts everything together for them, and it did he founded that in I think December of 1992, I believe. 92 or 93 was the first issue in France, and then it did very well. So in December of 1998, the U.S. edition launched, and when he was thinking of launching the U.S. edition, he was introduced to a Dominican of our province. He was introduced to Father Cameron.
Oh, okay.
So that's how he became the first editor.
Now, how similar are the two? One's in French, but is it the same meditation?
No, so that's right. That's a question I get a lot. That's a good question. People ask that often. I mean, obviously the mass readings, that's going to be the same, just in different languages. The cover is nearly always the same, and so the commentary, most of the time, it has been Mr. Dumont himself writing a brief commentary on the cover art. Which is that's the first thing people see of Magnificat. It's beautiful, and for many years he's written a little commentary on the back page that explains what's going on in the cover art. So that will be translated for our issue as well. But otherwise, the meditations, I choose those, and we have essayists and people who write articles and essays each month. Anthony Esselin writes a lengthy column every month. Heather King, another one. John Gennaro teaches at Christendom. He writes great conversion stories. That's a good, very popular one as well.
Does Jennifer Hubbard still write?
She does. Yeah. Yep. She's in there several times a year. Yep.
Yeah. And what are her? Because she's the mother of one of the children that were killed
in Newtown. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So she writes very, very movingly about that experience, and so there are themes that really resonates with people. We hear from readers about her columns. Just surrender, trust. Offering your suffering. So.
And Heather King's so great. I read her book, and I've listened to her on reviews. One of her books on Redeemed or something. I think
that's right. Yeah, that's the one.
And she's so great because she's a recovered alcoholic, and she brings that great language and themes into it. Mm-hmm. I think that really speaks to modern culture.
Yeah, she's good, and her column too is really great. It exposes people to inspirational lives, that aren't people who aren't canonized saints. So her feature is called Credible Witnesses, and so it could be somebody who was involved in art, or somebody who founded an order, but is less known. So yeah.
Have you ever had Meg Hunter Kilmer write for you?
She's written for the Advent Companion and Lenten Companions, a special little publication that has come out during for the season of Advent. It's like the little kind of a little booklet that has a meditation for each day for Advent and Lent, and that gives an opportunity for those are all written by people for that publication, whereas the meditation of the day in Magnificat, really, those all come from a published book. So people aren't writing those,
Right.
Yeah. But so, yeah, I've met her too.
Yeah, we just had her on the show, and I was reading her book on the saints, and she is a good writer. And
she's a very good writer, yeah.
She knows
I
how
thought
to,
the same, yeah.
Yeah, she knows how to do the emphasis, what to emphasize. Her speaking's like that too,
Yeah, I met her once. I had read a number of her columns for Aletheia, because she would write about saints for Aletheia. And then one day, I came out of the sacristy for Mass at the Catholic Center at NYU one afternoon, and I just began Mass, and I looked into it, and I thought, that person looks like Meg Hunter Kilmer. I just recognized from the little picture that was on and after Mass, one of the Focus missionaries who had been serving Mass, I said, can you go see if that's Meg? And he said, yeah, that's she. Yeah. So we ended up being able to meet and speak a bit, and it was she was doing, I think, a theology on tap in the Archdiocese. But she does have a good way of really speaking directly to people, She said she told the group that she was speaking to, here in New York there are many, many different masses every day. She said, so if you're not going to daily Mass, it's because you don't want to. She said, you don't have to go to daily mass, right? You're not obligated to go to daily mass. But she said, but don't pretend like it's because you don't have the opportunity. I just thought that was just really very funny. So.
And what's the feedback you get on it? The people that have the Magnificat and.
We get a lot of emails and letters. So a lot of just touching, very kind of simple and touching remarks about how they carry it with them throughout the day, or we get kind of humorous ones like it drives me crazy when I misplace my Magnificat. I left it in the church and I went back and it was gone. So I just hope somebody found it. And so people often say they feel lost without it. So we get a lot of just gratitude. And then, really, it's like, but what I found is people think of Magnificat as a kind of companion for it's something that's very intimate to them because they're using it in a way, they're using it for a part of their life, or that's something that's central to their life. It's with them in their most delicate and kind of sensitive moments. It's with them when they're at mass.
It's a friend.
Yeah, it's like a friend, right? That's right. And so I try to emphasize that in what I write. That and in the little messages that I write, that we pray for one another also, and to encourage us to pray for other people who are reading Magnificat, and that we're in a way we're kind of united in this through this publication. So
I've got a friend of mine that uses that when she goes to mass, and she would write down like things like maybe the priest said at the mass, the homily, and her own thoughts, and made it like meditation points. And I was she let me read some of the things, and it was I thought it was just so powerful. I don't know, there's something about just do it. Yeah, right in the margins, and just yeah, there was something about you got it there. Just do it, and just engage, and write a thought down, and
no, you should. And I mean, you get a fresh copy in a few weeks, so it's not like you're marking up this book that you're gonna have to. So,
that's the New York in you. I was trying to fit that.
That's right. So, yeah.
But you, we should also say you have like the Christian prayer, right? The morning prayer and the evening prayer in there.
That's right. So there's the meditation of the day. That's a big feature, and because the Mass is so significant. And then there's a morning prayer and an evening prayer, so that people can pray, in a structure that's kind of inspired by the Liturgy of the Hours. It's not the Liturgy of the Hours, but that the most important thing is for people to pray, and so it makes it easy and straightforward for people to pray in a way that mirrors the pattern of the Church in the morning, in the afternoon, or in the evening, and then again there's an order for night prayer. So that's helpful too, to just take a few minutes and punctuate your day. And then the special the articles, that are written by different authors. And then there's always an art feature besides the cover commentary that Mr. Dumont usually writes. There's also a special article in the back on the kind of colored glossy pages in the back of the magazine that is a more extended treatment of like the history, what's going on in a piece of art, and usually written by somebody who has some background as an art teacher, an art historian, or
Elizabeth Lav.
That's right. She writes, and Dennis McNamara is another one. He teaches at Benedictine.
Is he the architecture guy?
Yeah, that's right. He's great too. Yeah, I know him personally as well. But we have several people who write those art essays, and they're great.
And I try to think of this sometimes. with the liturgy of the hours that you're praying with the church. It's a fulfillment of Christ's command to pray unceasingly in the church. Religious and priest are bound to pray this, and yes, it can be tedious, no doubt, that you can check out as you're reading it. But sometimes, like when I'm traveling and I'm by myself, I'll sense the power of uniting myself with the church's prayer. It just feels like very strengthening.
That's right.
That I'm not doing this by myself. This is, because people sometimes, they question, well, all this ritual and all these formulas and kind of rigid prayer, but it allows the church to pray together. And even though they're not physically together, but we can unite with other people praying the office. And
that's right. And if you've ever, we were speaking earlier, so I grew up in an evangelical Protestant church as a child, and if you have exposure to communities or groups that do a lot of kind of spontaneous prayer, it's not all completely original. Whatever claims we might think that if you're using this, Catholics use this scripted prayer all the time. It's not, well, if you hear somebody pray, spontaneously, a lot of times it's the same turns of phrase, and there's only, it's that's just kind of human. We reach for things that are familiar when we're in those moments, and that makes sense. So it's not a bad thing to nobody. I would just say, if you were trying to say something sweet or romantic to somebody you loved, someone you were dating, I don't think she would object if you were quoting Shakespeare.
Right.
So
I realize that about preaching too, and that it's oftentimes like maybe the homily that goes well is often form of material that I'm kind of piecing together, phrases and stuff I've used before. I guess somebody listening might think of, like, Martin Luther King, I have a dream. He'd used that phrase and that theme before that. And it's one of those powerful speeches in American history, and it's so anyway.
And also, people, it's as preachers, as much as you'd love to think, people kind of hang on every word and never forget anything you say. Everything you say is so remarkable that they remember every word. So no, I think people need to be encouraged with the truths. And so you can talk about the heart of Christ. You can talk about the Holy Eucharist. You can speak about things that have touched you deeply and that you speak about frequently. That can still be fresh, even if they're common themes to what you preach about. I think that's many great saints have done that.
What is the circulation of Magnificat now?
It's close to 300,000 for the U.S. edition. Yeah, I think it's about 300,000. So that's a big group. It's a lot of people reading every month.
Now you moved to New York just before COVID.
Well, I was in New York.
Already.
I was in New York before, but so I remember the pre-COVID and New York, which and the biggest difference I notice now, to be honest, is the number of closed storefronts, empty storefronts because so many businesses closed. Right. But otherwise, people are out. Central Park is full of life and full of people, and people are out and beginning to go back to their offices and walking. A lot of people walking on the sidewalks every day. So.
And you take walks in Central Park just to...
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. I have a rhythm that sometimes I've written about this too. To go to the office of Magnificat, I walk out the door of the Priory. Dominican Friar on Lexington Avenue, and walk one block over to Park Avenue. And so I walk south on Park Avenue to Grand Central Station, and I take a train north. So it's a reverse commute. So it's nice. It's kind of empty and quiet. And I take the train north along the Hudson River for about a half an hour, and then in Yonkers, New York, is where the offices of Magnificat are. Yeah. Well, they began at Dunwoody. and then moved as the company grew. They moved to office space, and that's near the train station.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, but in Yonkers as well.
Yonkers,
Yeah.
okay. And yeah, it's always struck me as a beautiful park. You know, the and just I read about some of the design of it. You know, even the trees they selected to plant.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah,
it was carefully. It was well
it
thought
was.
out.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and it's. I mean, it's. I mean, almost a miracle that it's just been protected. That somebody didn't at some point decide to develop it. You know.
Yeah.
It's a big piece of property, and I think it's a great relief for a lot of New Yorkers. You know, it's just to be around. It's got fields, big fields. I mean, so you go in certain parts of Central Park, you'd hardly know you were in the middle of a city.
Right.
So
I was watching. This is a documentary. We're just going to go freeform here on this interview, but it was made, I think, just after 9. Well, maybe like 05, and it's just great.
was this the Several Parts on New York?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's by Rick Burns.
Yeah.
He's the brother of Ken Burns, the
Okay.
famous documentary maker, and that's a really interesting, very well done documentary
Yeah.
about New York. Yeah,
And they had a section on
Yeah.
the park.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it was it's like this effort to bring, be able to bring the people together in a peaceful way and de-stress and everything. It was just so beautiful. They talked about that statue of the lady of the angel in the fountain.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was taken, I guess it's in John's Gospel, where the angel stirs the water before, and it's the first one jumps in, gets
Yes,
healed. You know?
that's right. Yeah,
I think that was the idea behind it. And like these would be the healing waters of a park, you know, to get respite from this big.
that's wonderful.
Yeah. And then too, there was an issue of, because she didn't have the angel didn't have super formal, like her dress didn't go quite down to her ankles or something. It was something like that, and so there was some protest, you know, but it was more of a peasant dress, and I thought even that was beautiful. It's kind of a beautiful image of Our Lady of being close. It was an angel,
Yeah.
but I thought of Our Lady being close to the people.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, the park is great. It's, as I say, it's very close to where I live, but just the number of churches in New York. There's so many beautiful churches.
Yeah.
So, and saints too. I mean, Saint Elizabeth Ann Seton, her home, her childhood family home is now a little Catholic chapel down on the southern end of the island, and then
And Wall
you have
Street area.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then where it's close to where you can get the ferry to go to the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
And then further up north, you can go to the shrine of Mother Cabrini, which her body is there. St. Francis Xavier Cabrini. And there's churches that are associated with Dorothy Day. So a lot of wonderful Fulton Sheen.
Yeah. Now, you're from Maine, Waterville?
Yes,
you said?
Waterville, Maine. Yep.
Yeah. So it's a smaller town, I guess.
Yep, that's right. Yeah,
and you said about.
I mean, we have a Walmart, so I mean, it's not. We're on the map in some way. So
those are Southern
standards.
standards.
Starbucks.
You bring it in.
We have a Walmart and a Starbucks. So.
In Tuscaloosa, I just laughed. One of the national championships, University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa won. And there's a day they wanted the people to enjoy it of Tuscaloosa. They bring it to the Walmart parking lot, and put it on some kind of stand there. But my first thought was like the temple of the Old Testament. Like it's the center of culture and commerce. So your story is you're baptized Catholic, but raised.
That's right. Yep.
Protestant.
My parents were married in the church. My father's part Lebanese and my mother's French Canadian, so that they had Catholic background, and were married in the church, and were committing to taking their faith seriously as they married. And I have an older sister. She was baptized in the Catholic Church as well. So both of us were. But then shortly after I was baptized, just through some of their friendships and other involvement that they had in Bible studies, my parents got kind of swept into a Protestant community and a Protestant church. So I was raised without any conscious involvement, no conscious experience or memory of the Catholic faith. So initially, I was going to an Assemblies of God church, which is in the Pentecostal wing of Protestantism, and it was a new church. It had been founded by I think a man who was probably a very good man, or probably a very holy man, and so my parents were part of this church as it was being built, really, and that's how I was raised. That's how I grew up, and then. About the time I was in high school, he retired. The founding pastor retired, and then it just went through a series of changes of different pastors and not getting the one that would kind of they went through a few that didn't quite work, and then the church began to become really heavily focused on charismatic experiences and kind of almost like pressuring that. And so it lost a lot of people. A lot of people left. And then we went to an evangelical free denomination, which, again, was a very intelligent, good place at that time. And then I went off to college. So I wasn't in that one for very long before I went off to college. And I went to Gordon College in Massachusetts. And then was faced for the first time with the question, where am I going to go to church? Which am I going to go to the dominant denomination that we were most recently going to? Should I go to a different one? And to be frank, it was a lot of weeks. It was about as scientific as who had a car and where I could get a ride to. So churches in the area would often sponsor rides for students from Gordon, and the college had some vans that would go to different, major churches in the area. So I went to several different places, but by the time I was finishing my time there, I had discovered that a kind of conservative Episcopal church, kind of high Anglican, high Episcopal church, and that was really what introduced me to liturgical worship. I had not been raised with any animosity towards the Catholic Church. So when I discovered the Episcopal Church, I was kind of discovering it myself, as a liturgical form of worship for the first time, and was really moved by that experience. And so then began to read and to look into more like the history of the church, and then it didn't take me long. I didn't sort of stay in the Episcopal Church for that long. Eventually, I decided to go through RCIA in the local Catholic parish in Beverly, Massachusetts.
Oh.
And then was confirmed at Easter in 2004.
Did your parents come back to?
They did, yeah. So and they were actually reconciled to the church by the time I was confirmed, because all they had to do was go to confession.
Right.
They had already gone through all their sacraments, of course, when they were younger. So at first they were surprised when I was getting more serious about it and thinking about it, but as I began to kind of talk to them more and share with them what I was reading and learning, they realized very quick. It was a great grace. They just realized how much they had not understood when they were younger, and so they returned to the Catholic faith.
And then how did you discern a call to the Dominicans?
I was living, after college, I moved to Austria for 4 years. I was a graduate student at the International Theological Institute, the ITI, for 2 years.
Did you study at Steubenville at all?
I didn't study at Steubenville, no. But then I worked for Franciscan University's study abroad program for 2 years, and that's during those. So I had 4 years in this small town in Austria total, and that's where I met a Dominican. He was a German Dominican, and he was the prior of the community in Vienna. And he would come out a couple of days a week and teach classes for the ITI, the graduate program that I was part of. And so I got to know him very well. And then one summer when I needed to study German better, I was beginning the job for Franciscan. and I asked him if I could live in the Priory for the summer to study German. I don't know why it occurred to me I don't know why that occurred to me as an appropriate question to ask him. Like that's not usual.
Right.
But maybe it was a grace, because I didn't understand that was not common, But he said, "Well, I will speak to my community. I will ask the community," and he said, he came back to me. He said that I spoke to the brethren, and they said, "Yes, it's okay." So I studied German for quite a bit one summer, and by the end of the summer, I had a vocation. I think I stayed in Austria another couple of years, but began to become very close with that community.
And you got a master's or a doctorate?
That's right. Yeah, I got a master's degree while I was studying.
You'd completed an economics degree in
Maine? Yeah.
Okay.
I had gone to Gordon College in Massachusetts and studied economics. That's right.
And was that where Waldstein taught?
He was teaching in Gaming. That's right. Yeah. So I had him for courses. I remain close to his family. He's a very good man. Really, that's a wonderful family. So of course he's got a new book on the theology of the body. Yeah. Very big. Long book. A very thorough examination of the theology of the body, and that was getting that new translation out, that edition that he did, and with the long introduction, he was working on that and kind of while I was there, while I was his student, it was great.
Yeah, and then I ordered that new book he's got. That's his own writings, right?
That's right. Okay. Yeah. So this is his own. So the other one was a kind of corrected a kind of official translation of the theology of the body, because as I recall, the first edition of the theology of the body, whenever that was published in the 90s, I guess, that it basically because they were Wednesday audiences. They were translated by different people each week. It was like in the L'Osservatore Romano or something. Right. I think if I remember this correctly, there were faults with the translation because it wasn't done as a whole work. Right. And so they discovered that there were inconsistencies in how they approached different concepts linguistically. And so Waldstein got, the manuscript that Wojtyła had brought with him to Rome, because that was based on things that he had been writing and working on even before he was the Pope, all of his involvement with those married couples that he did in Poland. And so he worked with some Polish people, and Waldstein, Michael Waldstein worked with other scholars but produced this really kind of, so to say, magisterial translation of it with great attention to detail. And he and Professor Waldstein also wrote a long introduction, very philosophical introduction to that work. But now this, like you said, this new book is really, it's his own lengthy analysis of the theology of the body.
I'd read that introduction and I just blew my doors off. I was like, whoa, this, because he was saying this is what it's about. This is the purpose of it. And it's like, I never quite heard it put that way. You hear a lot of popular people that speak on it, and it's great. But he brought a whole new level, I thought, to it.
Oh, yeah.
He's like the definitive, I think, interpreter of it.
That's right. Yeah. Somebody, he was just, I wasn't able to be there. I was away on retreat, but he spoke recently at the New York Encounter, which is the big annual gathering from Communion and Liberation, CL, Monsignor Giussani's group. And Dr. Waldstein spoke at that, and I heard from somebody that went, and she said it was amazing. She said it was really wonderful.
Yeah. So you had courses.
Yeah.
Under.
Yep. Yeah, I knew him very well, and still in touch with him and his family. And their son is a Cistercian monk and a priest in Vienna at Heiligenkreuz.
But he's back in the United States, right? Or
Dr. Waldstein is in the United States. Okay. Yeah, he teaches at Franciscan University.
Oh, he does. Okay. And then so you got an STL or something?
I did that. The STL was from after I joined the Dominicans. That's right. That's from the Dominican House of Studies. But in Gaming, I was a layman. I hadn't yet just to become a Dominican. So I the degree I got is the MTS, the Master of Theological Studies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you work with Mary Healy at all over there?
I know her a bit,
yeah.
and I've met her several times. I know the family well. Her brother Nick Healy is at the JP2 Institute. I know him and his family very well. They were some of the first people I met when I entered the church in 2004, and he and his wife Marushka were just beginning their family, and they were in Gaming, and they welcomed me and really actually, to be honest with you, they welcomed me to Gaming and made me feel at home in a way that was, like I could not have asked for.
Right.
And so I still am close to them, and their sister, Nick and Mary's other sister, Jennifer Healy, was in Gaming for many years working for the LCI, the Language and Catechetical Institute.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Which
okay,
taught,
Jennifer.
which teaches English and theology to Eastern Europeans and Asians.
Yeah.
This is a very great institute as well. Jennifer's now back in the United States, and she works for the USCCB.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great program. To bring this all together, I did like a summer at Steubenville, and I met with those students. So that program you just mentioned is about training catechists here to go back to these former Eastern Bloc countries.
Yep. So that's right. That's right.
And
Mary Healy is a scripture scholar as well.
Right.
And so I use some of her books in Magnificat from time to time.
And she's the sister.
And she's a sister.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, she teaches at Sacred Heart in Detroit.
Yeah. Because we interviewed Jennifer years ago about the program. But then I was really touched as a student meeting like a handful of these students that were like my age. I was doing some philosophy at Steubenville before studying for the priesthood. So I was studying with a girl from Poland and Lithuania and Albania, Croatia, and probably other places. But they were around my age, and they'd all grown up in a persecuted church. And it was just fascinating. It was just one of the most powerful experiences of my life, really. I grew up in North Alabama. There's no real Catholic culture or anything. But to hear like their experiences and their faith and stuff, it was just great. It was a great experience.
Yeah. When I got to Gaming, my roommate was from Belarus. He had been an LCI student before. So that the program that you're talking about would as people progressed in English and got enough background in Catholic kind of catechesis, basically, then sometimes they would be able to be accepted, and they would do a further degree at the Theology Institute that was there. So my roommate was from Belarus. My Latin teacher was Romanian. I had another professor that was Lithuanian, German, Dominican. We had Ukrainian. There was a Ukrainian priest, and Byzantine liturgy every day. Catholic Mass every day, Roman Catholic Mass every day, and there were Slovakian students as well. It was amazing.
Just universal church and persecuted church, people coming out of like Albania. I think the church was completely suppressed, and they had a woman from there. And
that's right.
Yeah, so it was incredible. So, but you went on to get a degree in theology from the House of Studies.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep. So after the novitiate, and I spent 5 years in Washington studying philosophy and theology. And so when I was ordained in 2014, I was finishing the licentiate, the STL.
Okay. And you were a big reader, I guess. You love to read.
I love to read, and I have some background in writing and editing, and so that's kind of helped for the work that I do in Magnificat. But so in my office, I have four good good-sized bookshelves of books that I'm constantly getting new books too as they come out to use for the meditations.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can get enough authors from the United States, like, to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Yep.
And have you worked closely with Heather King? Have you?
We've
Yeah.
met a few times, and
Yeah.
she's come to New York for different things, and we've spoken on the phone, and we correspond as we shape the list of topics for the new
Yeah.
year, and so I work with all the different authors for
Right.
coming up with the ideas for that. Yeah, but they do a great job.
Yeah. And what is the combination of like prayer, spirituality, brilliance, and just a grinding writer kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, if you read books about writing, for example, books by people who write guides on writing, or one of my favorites is by William Zinsser. It's called On Writing Well. It's very famous. It's very enjoyable to read. But he really makes the point. Writing is work. It just requires effort. It requires discipline. It's helpful if you set aside particular times to just write. And a lot of people, even novelists, famous writers, will often say they just wrote. They tried to write like a certain number of words each day, or they would write for a certain number of hours each day. So there's a discipline to it. And then it is a spiritual. Magnificat is a spiritual work. It's not just journalism. It's not.
Mhm.
It's not a novel.
Yeah.
So it also is something that I try to approach with a sensitivity to as a work of prayer.
Yeah.
I think of it. I am conscious as I'm choosing meditations. Like, is this something that will nourish? And will it be understandable, and will it nourish the average reader, the average person?
Right.
So if it's too dense or too complicated or
Right.
theological, it's going to be hard to comprehend.
Right.
And if it doesn't have enough substance, then it could be disappointing.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of constantly trying to evaluate the suitability of a text for a connection to the gospel for the day. If there's a saint who's got writings, I always try to use that person's writings on that, St. Augustine or say.
Yeah, and there's something about I guess it's always kind of mysterious to me. Like there's the rules of writing and hard work and all that, and there's also just that kind of burst of insight, and I think like in faith, it's maybe like your experience of this point, and they have a guy that just retired from here. He's on the grounds crew, and he's a devout Baptist, and he would tell me, would bump into him outside, and he'd tell me what his pastor was preaching on, and he would kind of go into his own thoughts on it, and it was always so striking because it was always in a language. As a Catholic, I'm not reading an African American Baptist style,
right.
And, but it just rang true because he was saying something from his experience. He's putting in his own words.
That's right.
And it just had a pop to it. It had a movement to it, and
that's right. That's right. And I think writing is communication. Preaching is communication. There's a funny line, William Zinsser in this book that I was mentioning, On Writing Well. He says, many people. He's trying to explain why we don't have trouble communicating with each other. If somebody asks you what you think about something, you sat down with them, you would speak freely, right? Mm-hmm. But then he says, whenever people sit down to write, they sit down to commit an act of literature, and then what comes out is just like this pompous, kind of dry sounding like. Did a human being communicate this? Like, I always remember that line. Most people when they sit down to write, sit down to commit an act of literature. He says, no, don't try to compose the next great the next
Yeah.
great essay. Just
Yeah.
communicate what what
Yeah.
you believe in and what you
Yeah.
think someone needs to hear.
Yeah.
And similarly with preaching, it's like if I try to sound like Fulton Sheen,
Mhm.
I'll sound ridiculous.
Right. Right.
So I just think, what is it? How has the Lord put something upon my heart? How has the Lord touched me with something that I feel is important to communicate about His love and our life,
Mhm.
and speak like you're gonna speak to real people.
Yeah. Yeah, because when I was going to ask you about the link to writing and preaching, because it is seem like it's one of those, maybe the most common way we exchange information is just talking to one another.
That's right.
And
Yep.
so I used to listen to like This American Life.
Sure.
Ira
Yeah.
Glass. I don't know if the show's really gone off the rails or not, but I remember he did a series of talks on how to produce this kind of show, and the show could be brilliant at times. And he played a clip of him as an early NPR reporter. It was some report on the grain prices and something, and it's like this really complicated, convoluted kind of, you didn't know what he just said. He played the clip, comes back, and just said something like, huh? What did I, he's saying that. Just say it simply. What are you trying to say? And keep that the focus. And sometimes I do that with preaching. I'll just get out, this is the main point. And just like throw it out there. I don't know what I'm going to do for the next 10 minutes, but this is the main point. And just get to it in some sense. I mean, I don't know, not to lose sight, I guess. Mm-hmm. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. Yep.
And
yeah.
And any other experiences now? You've been a Dominican for a little bit.
Yep. Now I suppose close, almost 14 years now. Yeah, because I entered in 2008. And I feel very blessed and grateful for the call, and it's hard to predict the way your life goes. God leads you, and so when I was confirmed in 2004. And around that time, somebody handed me a copy of Magnificat. I thought, this is really neat. I said, this is beautiful. And also, I'm totally honest with you. Around that same time, I was watching EWTN, and it was so wonderful. I have a very distinct memory of this little clip that would be on the EWTN television, of like this high kind of, whether it was polyphony or sort of this high singing, and an incense thurible swinging and smoke. And I think it was like what they call B-roll, it was just kind of in between something, or just before the Mass would begin.
Right.
There was this brief clip.
Right.
And I think it showed I think it was actually the gold of the altar up at the shrine, of the Shrine of the Blessed Sacrament. But that image of this thurible and the incense and the music, and even though that clip was just shown very briefly each day before the Mass would begin, it really moved me. And watching Mother Angelica, Father Mitch, and other shows, first is hearing the sung, the Chaplet of Divine Mercy. That melody kind of gets into your mind. Mm-hmm. These things, when I was just a young man living on the North Shore of Boston, and the direction of my life was changing significantly, because I had studied economics and I was Protestant. Now all I was doing was reading Catholic things, and I was becoming Catholic, and didn't know what I was going to do next. And EWTN was just such a great resource, and to say, somebody handed me a copy of Magnificat too. Then I end up in Austria, and I meet the Dominicans. I didn't know who the Dominicans were before that, And then now I'm the editor of Magnificat, and I'm like sitting at EWTN, I'm like, this is so strange. So I could never have predicted this. It's extraordinary. So,
well, that opening of that Mass you mentioned, I think that was done by Jody Copeland, He's the oldest employee here. He actually when Mother Angelica built the studio, they were working, they had a garage, and I think he was one of the guys working on that garage stuff, and then was one of the guys working on the studio, and then she needed cameramen and stuff, so she asked him to stay and be one of the first employees. So he's got a real artistic ability to
Good.
it. But,
no, it's as EWTN is a great feature of the American Catholic Church, and really, and for the whole world now. I mean, I think it has helped so many people.
yeah.
You know?
And I think just, I guess we can close on this, but I think that is one thing America does well, is like these initiatives on evangelization and stuff. And I don't know if it's because we have more kind of wealth and things to fund such things, but our kind of the American spirit that's baptized, to start a business and do something, and you got the freedom to do it. But it's because I think that's fed the network well. We just have a constant stream of people that are doing things for the Lord, come through here, and it's just kind of fitting that it's in America, I think. But well, thanks so much, Father Sebastian, for chatting with us.
You're very welcome, and thanks for having me on. It was a great privilege.